Hello, dreamers and thinkers, and welcome back to another episode of Undone. On today's episode, we are not joined by any guests. It's just you and me, and we're just gonna have a little chitty chat. I thought it was about time that I formally introduce myself to some of you. Some of you already know me. You have been here since season 1, if we can call it that. I don't know, episode 1, the beginning. Some of you are new and may have gone back to the early episodes. If you haven't done so, I highly recommend you do, because I think it will give a clearer picture of what it is that I am hoping to achieve and create with this platform. But yeah, for those of you who do not formally know me, my name is Kudzai. I am the host of Undone. Okay, before we get into the nitty gritty, I even have notes because I wanted to stay on track because I can ramble and that is a problem. So I was like, I need to stay on track and make sure I get my message across. So today's unpopular opinion is, so I have here written, some fears don't make sense to have after 21, e.g. dogs. Now, before you come for me thinking I'm speaking from a place of privilege because I have successfully gotten rid of my fear of dogs, I would just like to say that this was inspired by a story that occurred over Christmas in December when we were in Perth for my friend's wedding. My family and I stayed for a extra few days and we went to Rottnest Island, and when we went, none of us knew, although we should have when we did our research. We didn't realize that the little animals there, the quokkas or whatever they're called, are actually part of the reason people go to Rottnest Island. I thought it was just the beautiful beach and the activities. No, it's not. There's little quokkas, cockers, whatever you call them. And my siblings and I were petrified. When I tell you I was petrified, but as a 25-year-old, how petrified can you be of a tiny little animal? Especially sitting at 5'10" and a half. I am 5'10" and a half. And I'm 25 years old. How petrified can I be of a tiny little animal? But those things, oh my God, they ruined our whole eating experience. We're at this cafe that allowed them to roam freely because there's so many of them. And they're a protected wildlife, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, these little things were I had to leave early. I was like, y'all can keep eating without me. I'm done. I've lost my appetite. I'm not hungry no more. That's me done. They were coming up underneath the table, would come up to your feet, would stare at you with their beady eyes while standing by your knees, and then at one point, so I would put my feet up every time they'd come. My siblings would full run because I'm trying to be cute. I'm trying to be dignified. You know what I'm saying? This thing came to me and my feet were already up. And it's full tried climbing on my chair, which it hadn't done before. And at that point I was like, okay, I'm tapping out. I'm done. And all the white people were looking at us oh my God, who are these black people? Why are they scared of these cute little animals we have here? And so that in part inspired my unpopular opinion, which is that some fears just don't make sense to have after the age of 21. It's embarrassing. Really and truly, it's embarrassing. Imagine being chased by a dog because you were scared of it and you're running away at 30. I felt stupid running away from these stupid little quokkas, but I was scared. Y'all. And fear knows no age, but I kind of needed to know age. Please respect me. I'm an adult. I pay taxes. What do you mean? Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the meaty part of today's episode. So I guess I just kind of wanted to bring you guys on the journey of how we got from episode 1 to whatever number episode we're at right now. I guess season 1 to season 2, but I think season 2 is just going to be a continuation until forever. So the foundation, I'm going to call the early episodes the foundation, how we got from the foundation to where we are now, which I believe is kind of the structure and the flesh and muscle, whatever, of the podcast. So my passion has always been mental health. I didn't study anything mental health related, which I think is probably really hilarious. But I also think that would have ruined my passion. Hashtag don't monetize everything you're passionate about. Anyway, my passion for mental health started with the conversations that we would have around the dinner table in my house. So both of my parents are mental health nurses, but they both studied mental health nursing when we moved to England. So before then, they both worked in like labs. They did lab tech stuff. Lol, yes, it's genetic. I wanted to become a scientist, like a lab scientist. And they did the whole lab tech thing. Anyway, so they studied mental health nursing when we moved to England, which was a really interesting experience from the conversations we've had, because obviously in the context of Zim, one, what they did, like it was a completely different career. But two, coming from Zim in those years, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, those were not conversations that were being had. Like that was not a normalized career path or anything like that. And even when they chose it, it wasn't necessarily out of like interest or passion or anything like that. It was really because that's what paid the most and it was a quick degree. Like, let's be completely honest. African parents were trying to make as much as they could and take care of their families in the diaspora and back home as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. But in that, it made them realize a lot of things about how they had been raised, different things in terms of like cultural context and all that kind of stuff. And so by the time we moved to Australia, and I'm now like at an age where I'm figuring things out and becoming an adult and starting to think for myself, these are conversations that we're having around the dinner table about what mental health looks like in our community, what mental health looks like in the context of like African people, what mental health looks like in the context of like African countries and culture and all the different things that come with that. And so that just really sparked an interest, to be completely honest. And I guess also my experience and the experience that from the conversations that I had with friends around feeling displaced. Like I don't feel Australian, I don't feel British. I know I'm Zimbabwean, but when I go to Zim or when I talk to my family in Zim, I don't really feel super Zimbabwean either. And people have a way of like making jokes or comments that make you realize that yes, you're Zimbabwean, but you're not Zimbabwean. Like you're not Zimbabwean like they're Zimbabwean kind of thing. And so the whole I just became fascinated with how the migrant experience impacted mental health and belonging, and how you defined community and how you saw the world and all that kind of stuff, which are basically the themes that I explored in the first season in our foundation building episodes, where I kind of explained my story and like coming into it. I had my friends come on and join me and we discussed how moving at different ages impacted us. So I left Zim when I was 4. That's a completely different experience to someone who leaves when they're like 14 and someone who leaves when they're like 20. Like those are not the same experiences. Moving with family and moving by yourself are also very different experiences. Black tax is a conversation I would love to have with anyone who will let me. But that was also a thread that came up a lot as well in those episodes. And so yeah, and then in our foundation building episodes, I also have a conversation with my dad and one of my aunties about what their experience was like being a parent and being a husband and being a daughter and all of those things whilst moving, because you as a person, as an individual, are going through this like just jarring experience of moving to a new culture, new country, leaving everything behind, taking a risk, all of that kind of stuff. But you're not doing it in isolation. You're doing it as part of a family unit. You're doing it as someone who has a little someone who is relying on them. And that's a lot. And I think sometimes we don't have that conversation. I am also super duper passionate about the intergenerational conversation surrounding mental health. I can't even say especially in the African communities, because I think I don't know in any other community, to be completely honest. That is where I have experience, and that is where my passion lies. I think these are conversations we need to be having intergenerationally, because there's no point in the young people healing and moving on and identifying things and finding language and getting better and leaving their parents behind. That reminds me, there was a quote that I read in this book. Is an excerpt from a book I'm currently reading called Sour Heart by Jenny Zhang. I hope I pronounced that correctly. So I didn't actually intentionally pick this book up. I'm pretty sure it was $2 at an op shop, and I read the blurb and saw that it was about someone else's migrant experience. And I was like, lovely. Right up my alley, right on brand. Let's do it. But basically she says, what makes you happy makes mummy happy, she would always say to me. Sometimes in Chinese, which I wasn't so good at, but I tried for her and for my father. And when I couldn't, I would answer them in English, which I also wasn't so good at. But it was understood that while I could still improve in either language, my parents could not. They were on a road to nowhere. The wall was right up against them. So it was up to me to get really good. It was up to me to shine, and that scared me because I wanted to stay behind with them. I didn't want to go any further than they could go. And I underlined that, where she goes, it was up to me to shine, and that scared me because I wanted to stay behind with them. I didn't want to go any further than they could go. And I was like, whoa, she just provided language for what I think some people feel around getting educated and the opportunities and all that kind of stuff. And healing comes with being the child of immigrants. I just think our community should heal in unison and together. I don't think it should be that the younger generation are finding all this language for their experiences and their emotions and all that kind of stuff and leaving the parents and the grandparents out of the conversation. I think we should bring them with us. So yes, all that to say, I am super duper passionate about mental health and it being a holistic and intergenerational approach. Holistic in the sense that I don't think it's just the conversations where we speak about mental health, which a lot of the first season, the foundation building episodes were about, and the different ways that it can look and the different ways it comes up, like even with the eating disorder stuff, is those are not conversations that are had in our communities. Those are taboo, but also a very real conversations that need to be had, because that usually comes from a lot of different things, how we're socialized in our different cultures, the anxiety and sometimes pressure that children can feel to be worthy of the sacrifices that their parents have made, or to kind of be like a third parent in the family. And if you don't have the right language and the tools and you don't know how to deal, that can be a route that you go down under. That can be a route that you go down. And that is not helpful. And so I just felt those were important conversations that needed to be had. Conversations around racism, like really just being frank about the fact that the white people that we interact with and the systems that we're a part of and have to exist in are not made for us. They're not designed for us to thrive in them. They're barely designed for us to even just exist in them. Every day kind of feels like a fight. And just having a frank conversation around that as well. But I feel like the most recent episodes have been around elevating our stories and our experiences and kind of just, I feel like it's really giving Black excellence, you know what I mean? In like the non-cringy way, where it's like, okay, I think pain will always be a part of our stories, to be completely honest. And I think that's just the fruit of colonization and colonial systems. But yeah, being able to have like a conversation around, okay, in spite of it all, this is where I am. This is what my story is now. This is how I have used that pain and difficulty and all of that kind of stuff to kind of be where I am. I see conversations like the one I had with Michelle about social media activism also as part of that holistic look at mental health, because as people who have come from colonized countries, who have experienced the pain and the ongoing, the downstream effect of that level of violence and just forced takeover. Or even when we see Black bodies being killed in media, and we know that we have to stand up and fight for our communities, but also at the same time, it just feels too close to home. Our ability to engage with social media activism varies. How we engage with social media activism is so much more different, because we have to be careful of the vicarious trauma that comes with that, and taking care of ourselves. And also the fact that when you engage with social media activism, I once had someone put it to me this way, is that like, as a person of color, you are fighting you're fighting for your humanity. You're fighting for someone to see it. You're fighting for someone to see it as valuable and worthy, and to worthy of their attention, worthy of their empathy and their care and their fight, to join you in that fight. Whereas for some people, it's literally just it's just a debate. It's like a fun intellectual exercise for them. And that can really be draining as well. So I really think that is my why for this podcast, is having a holistic and intergenerational approach to conversations surrounding mental health, and elevating our stories and our voices that I think are so important in the community. And when I say our, I'm not going to lie, I'm being really specific to the Australian diaspora, just because I feel like we're in the stages where we are building up our, what being African Australian looks like, what our culture is, and what our voice is, finding our spaces, creating those spaces. Whereas I think in Australia and not in Australia, in America and the UK, people have been there for longer and in larger numbers and have already created that for themselves. I don't think it gets any easier, by no means. And we can see that in media. We can see that in the statistics. It definitely doesn't get easier. But I think there is a culture that people can identify with and contribute to and are comfortable with in the UK and in America. Whereas in Australia, we are in our building stages of that right now. And so I'm very specific about saying our voices being African Australians. I want to give us a platform. I want people to know the spaces that we're in, the cool things that we're doing. Yesterday, I went to this performance showcase at the NGV, and it was so cool to see so many faces that I recognized who were doing amazing things in the different arts spaces, but also to be exposed to so many people that I didn't already know. And I'm like, at one point I turned to my friend and I was like to her, there's people like you, there's people like Empha, there's people like, who was performing at the time? There was this other person who was performing at the time. I was like, there are great voices, great lyricists that are coming out of the music scene here. And you're telling me the girl who sang Ski Yi is who popped off and went viral? This cannot be serious. So I'm really hoping that this platform really grows and is able to just shine a light. And for those of you who might not know some of the people that I'm talking about, you would get to learn them. I want the African Australian space to feel so small. I want it to feel small for everyone. I want it to feel like we know everyone who's everyone, so that when people are making it on world stages, it's a win for all of us. We are cheering them on, because you felt like I've been there since day one with that person. So to explain why I was gone for so long, because I know some people wanted to know, I have tried recording this episode 1,000,001 times. So for the longest time, I just have not had the language for why I was gone for so long, until recently I was having a conversation with my friend. She asked why I used photos of the guests instead of myself, because it can look like that's who owns the podcast. And then the other logoing that changed on the other podcast episodes literally just says Undone, the podcast. And I was basically explaining how I have intentionally decentered myself in terms of from a branding point of view from the podcast, because first of all, I don't really in as much as this counts as content creation, I don't see myself as a content creator. I don't want to be a content creator. That's not really the vibe. Although once upon a time, I did try and start a YouTube, but really, again, it was just another platform to be having the conversations I have on here. So yeah, I had this battle of wanting to be private, but also understanding that I wanted a platform that discussed things like this. And at that time, I think there was just a lot of stuff going on in my life. Also, I really not really struggled, but I think the perfectionist in me was loud. She was loud. She was screaming. And I just didn't want to fail on a public platform with a digital footprint. And by fail, I mean say something and then think differently, like just not align with that, like 6 months later or whatever down the track. Or say something and be like, oh, I probably could have said that differently. And now it's out there on the internet. Like, where do we go from here? Kind of thing. But over the years, I have just gotten okay with that. I'm like, it's life. It is what it is. It's a part of the process. I also don't need everything to be perfect before I release it. So I really worked on the releasing part, because the making part in terms of like the podcast and ideas and all that kind of stuff was never a problem. That was always the easiest part for me. Editing was not a joy, but we move. But it was learning to release what I had made to an audience, whoever that audience was, and being okay with whatever I had released being taken however it was taken, being understood however it was understood. And that's like the good and the bad, because I think also the other side of that was that, like, the positive side is that I felt the weight of the microphone, like metaphorically speaking. I felt the weight of the microphone, like, what am I speaking into here? I know I have a young audience who listen to me. And so that's also what like added to the pressure. But I think I know I have since like worked on that, moved on from that. And also the idea of decentering myself in terms of branding and just how the podcast is done. I realized I didn't really enjoy solo episodes like this. I'm not one of those people that can like write out a podcast script or like dot points and just sit here and speak into the mic and release that. Like, that's not fun for me. I enjoy having conversations with other people. I enjoy listening to people's stories. It's what I do in life generally. Like, I will leave my house, and if I'm out somewhere and I find someone with an interesting story, like, I don't care where we are, you are gonna tell me everything, or you have an interesting perspective. I'm just gonna keep asking you questions about like different topics that I think you might have an interesting perspective on. And so I was like, I actually know enough people in my life and will continue to make more connections that I can make episodes, lots of episodes, just interviewing the amazing people that are in my life already, let alone the people I'm going to meet or can get in contact with. So I really wanted to decenter myself, because I was like, I've shared my story and that was great for the foundation, but I want to hear other people's stories. I want to hear other perspectives. I want to hear other voices, and I want to elevate and platform those. And so that's where we are now. And then in future, I recently had a planning sesh with my girls. Those of you who follow the Instagram page, if you don't, I highly recommend you do, at undone.thepodcast. I have started this new segment called Undoing, and it's basically where I sit either in my car or with friends, and we just talk about whatever it is that we're currently in the middle of unpacking, undoing in our lives. Thoughts, observations, concepts, ideas, theories, that kind of thing. And we recorded it just before we started a planning session. So one of my friends, Nyasha, is a musician. My other friend, Taida, is the CEO and co-founder of Chosen Foundation, which is an amazing NGO that does a lot of sustainable and just practical work in Zimbabwe. And we were all going to come together and have a brainstorming planning meeting for 2024 for each of our different ideas. We came, it was kind of giving Shark Tank, I think. I don't know, I've never watched it. But we came and we're like, okay, this is my baby. This is what it means to me. This is what I hope it'll achieve in the world. This is what I have planned. And then the girlies gave feedback. And then we had like questions that we answered around like, what resources would you need? How can we pool our resources together to help each other? What are your weaknesses, so that we also have an awareness of that? Just that kind of thing. And yeah, I'm really excited for the things I have planned and where I see Undone just as a banner going. So not just the podcast. I'm gonna let y'all know now, 2024, we are having our first event, or maybe two, I don't know. And that also feeds into part of that, creating spaces, safe spaces, fun spaces for us to have the conversations that we want to have, or the experiences that are curated by us. And that again just feeds into the whole holistic mental health approach. Like, that is what I hope to do in future. If you got shmoney and you're trying to partner with us, hit me up in the DMs. Okay, if you know someone with shmoney and you think they could partner with us, let me know. If you have skills I can use to put on this event, let me know. That would be amazing. But yeah, I hope this episode answered my why. I think it's kind of a part 2 to the very first episode I put out, which was the intro episode of what I hoped Undone would be and why I chose the name Undone. I think this is just building upon that definition and what I hoped it would be, and also explaining to those who have been so loyal, I love you guys so much, why I was away for so long and why I'm back and I'm here to stay. So yeah, I can't even say I'll see you guys. You will all hear me on the next episode, where it will be back to regular programming, and I will be joined by a very amazing guest. I look forward to it. I have a few exciting guests actually for the first bit of the year. So yeah, bye.